I talk a little about what I had gone through, but right now we have somebody that will come and talk about it fully in detail, one step at a time. It may not be a surprise to you. Dr. Yal will come and speak about the nature of the situation, what went wrong. He will tell us. If you have pen, if you want to follow through with him, you can do that. Dr. Yal, you are welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you again for coming. I'd also like to extend my thanks to the people that have spoken before me here, in particular all those that prayed. Thank you so much for that. You have no idea how important it is that people remember that above all there's a judge of the earth. And that judge of the earth is one that's faultless, it's one that desires truth, and for him, only truth brings peace. So with that in mind, I'm going to go into some painful, perhaps comfortable, maybe even disturbing truths. But in the spirit of truth, we've got to talk about them if we're going to move forward. On Sunday, December 15th, 2013, a day that some Nuer youth have dubbed Bloody Sunday, Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, an ethnic Dinka, commenced the genocide of the ethnic Nuer citizens of South Sudan. The killing began in the capital city of Juba and was carried out by members of a personal army of ethnically Dinka soldiers. Most of these soldiers are from Kiir's home state of Barghazel. Few Nuer were safe from execution. Government soldiers, members of the clergy, police officers, and ordinary men, women, and children were fired upon with extreme prejudice. As the week wore on, the bodies began to pile up, as did fresh reports of atrocities. There are reports by NGOs of truckloads of bodies dumped in mass graves. Many people were dismembered and or burned. Women and girls were raped, and men were forced to eat the body parts of dead relatives or face death. Nuer citizens were pulled out of their homes and summarily executed. Their crime? Being Nuer. In one report, about 200 Nuer men were rounded into a one-room building. Soldiers fired upon these men through the windows. Only one man survived the ordeal to tell and show UN officials the scene. Initial estimates of the death toll were conservative, too conservative. Various international news agencies cited a death toll of 500, figures received from Salva Kiir's government and not from NGOs, or from those Nuer that survived by running into the UN compounds on the outskirts of Juba. As civil unrest in response to these killings grew throughout the country, Kiir soldiers and militant tribesmen, inspired by his genocide, began targeting Nuer in other parts of the country. And the genocide spread to Bor, Bentiu, and Malakal. In Juba alone, official estimates now place the death toll at approximately 10,000 or more. The Nuer count their dead at over 20,000. While it is true that news agencies report that approximately 10,000 people have been killed in this genocide, almost all these agencies admit that this number is almost certainly too low. Many that have witnessed the killing describe what they consider unspeakable crimes. There are reports of dismemberment of bodies and burnings of citizens in the outskirts of town. In conversation with members of the South Sudanese community that narrowly escaped the genocide with their lives, and we have a few of them here, it has been reported to me that the number of dead, many of whom had been buried in mass graves, number as high as 12,000. All of these people were killed in little over 1 week. And I've been told by family members living in South Sudan that sporadic targeting of ethnic Nuer by government forces still takes place in the strategic towns of Malakal, weeks perhaps even month after the initial killings began in Bor and in Juba. In response to the killings, ethnic Nuer soldiers under the command of a prominent Nuer commander by the name of Yak, an outspoken critic of the Kiir regime, retaliated against the killing of Nuer civilians and took control of Bentiu, the capital of the oil-producing Unity State. Also fighting against the Kiir regime is a militia of Nuer youths called the White Army, or White Army, a name derived from the white ash smeared on the face to prevent insect bites. This course of events, as it has been told me by a wide range of people that comprise Nuer government officials who have fled to the UN base on the outskirts of town, of Juba, journalists, intellectuals, or students. Add to this the overwhelming eyewitness accounts of ordinary Southern Sudanese, accounts that are near in perfect agreement in regard to both the root cause of the present conflict and the Kiir regime's genocide of ethnic Nuer. And the conclusion is clear. Kiir's genocide of the ethnic Nuer must be condemned by the international community and every peace-loving person on earth. Kiir must allow thorough investigation of all allegations of atrocities committed by his regime or by its indirect sponsorship. These investigations should be carried out by a team comprising individuals from established neutral parties. It should be clear by now that IGAD cannot serve in this capacity. All members of both Kiir's Presidential Guard and the members of his executive who had any part in the planning and execution of this genocide must resign from office and face subsequent charges under a South Sudanese ad hoc criminal court tribunal, or some international body like the ICC for crimes against humanity. And I should add that crimes against humanity here is not, in the legal lingo, is not as high as genocide. So we are pushing for genocide because that's what it was. In the starting months of the conflict, it is also reasonable that Kiir release all political prisoners. However, many South Sudanese and some outside analysts at the time marked the release of political prisoners as the key demand. But this has only tended to reinforce the Kiir's regime stance that the genocide is a political conflict and not a premeditated mass murder motivated for political reasons. There is a difference. I, for this reason, place it behind what I think ought to be the core demands as to keep his human rights violations at the forefront of this crisis. And it is absolutely integral that we do this. Otherwise, the Kiir regime will get away with murder. And this will not be a good foundation for South Sudan moving forward. To make matters worse, Kiir has recruited Ugandan North Sudanese rebels, JEM, to fight against those who want Kiir to step down. In Bentiu, North Sudanese rebels have been targeting Nuer civilians. Ugandan and perhaps Rwandan forces have been instrumental in protecting Kiir, leaving him free to carry out mass murder while the international community gazes on in silence. Through a policy of lies, propaganda, and subtle obfuscation of the truth, Kiir's regime has managed to convince the world that the killings in Juba and throughout the country were random occurrences. That anyone who insists that this war is a largely government-sanctioned ethnic cleansing be deemed a traitor to South Sudan and an inciter of ethnic strife. Thus, Kiir has been repressing South Sudanese journalists and intellectuals who do not toe the line he demands. All of this while feeding to international media a perverted picture of the truth. Even now, the killings of innocent Nuer civilians at the hands of forces loyal to Kiir continues. How do we know? There's been no press in South Sudan. How do we know what's happening in the bushes, where there's no media?